ever get sucked into a book, and I don't mean like a page turner, but like your mind just takes off on tangents.
Connecting the dots, brainstorming, maybe even daydreaming a bit.
Exactly. We're diving into that today. We've got this text conversation. Looks like someone was chatting with a bot about letting your mind wander while reading.
And get this, it might actually be beneficial.
No way. I always thought that was like a sign of bad reading comprehension.
Well, the source calls it mind wandering, and it says it's totally normal. Happens to everyone. It's when your brain kind of veers off the task at hand.
So the person in this chat, they described reading super slowly, like an hour on a page or two, because they're making all these connections with their own life,
Yep.
brainstorming ideas, even picturing scenarios inspired by the text.
Sounds familiar. I do that all the time.
Me too.
Yeah.
I thought I was just easily distracted. But the source gives 3 theories as to why this happens. The first is attention and concentration theory. Basically, our ability to focus, it's not constant. It goes up and down, and when it dips, boom, mind wandering.
Makes sense, right? We can only concentrate for so long before our brains need a break. The source also mentions the memory network theory, which says all our thoughts and memories are linked together like a massive web. So one idea can trigger a whole cascade of related thoughts.
It's like when you hear a song and it reminds you of another song and then another, and suddenly you've gone through like your entire music library in your head.
Ha ha ha, exactly. That's your memory network in action. And then there's the default mode network.
This one's really intriguing.
It is. It's a whole network in the brain that becomes active when we're not focused on a specific task. And guess what? It's heavily involved in daydreaming and mind wandering.
So it's like our brain's designated daydreaming zone.
Kind of. But it's not just about zoning out. It's where our minds make connections, get creative, and even help us process emotion.
Wow. So maybe this mind wandering isn't so bad after all.
Right. And the source argues that it's actually good for us. It lists 4 main benefits.
Okay, I'm all ears. Lay 'em on me.
The first is making connections. When we let our minds wander while reading, we're linking what we're reading to our own knowledge and experiences, which helps us understand the material on a deeper level.
So it's like building bridges between the words on the page and our own lives.
Exactly. Imagine you're reading about a character facing a tough decision. As you reflect on the situation, you might start to think about similar choices you've made in your own life. Suddenly, the character's struggles become more real, more relatable.
And you gain a new perspective on your own experiences too. I like that. What else?
Okay, so next up is stimulating new perspectives. By drifting away from the text, our minds can explore alternative viewpoints and generate new ideas.
So it's like taking a mental detour that can lead to unexpected discoveries.
Exactly. Let's say you're reading about a historical event. As you ponder the various factors that contributed to that event, you might start to consider alternative outcomes. What if this had happened instead of that? You're challenging assumptions and opening yourself up to new ways of thinking about the past, present, and future.
And what about this one? Boosting imagination. That sounds pretty cool.
It is. Mind wandering can spark vivid mental imagery and scenarios, which can really enhance our creative problem-solving skills. It's like the difference between looking at a map and actually exploring a new city.
When we let our minds wander while reading, we're not just passively absorbing information, we're actively constructing a world in our minds.
Precisely. You're engaging your senses, your emotions, your imagination. Think about reading a fantasy novel and picturing yourself flying on a dragon or battling a fearsome monster. That's your imagination at work, and those experiences can make you a more creative and innovative thinker in other areas of your life.
All right, so we've got making connections, stimulating new perspectives, boosting imagination. What's the 4th benefit?
The 4th one is reflecting systems thinking. It's the ability to see the big picture, how things connect and influence each other. By relating ideas from the text to our own experiences, we're demonstrating this systems thinking in action.
Okay, I need an example for this one.
Sure. Let's say you're reading about an environmental issue like deforestation. As you think about the causes and consequences of deforestation, you might start to connect it to other issues like climate change, poverty, and even global politics.
So it's like realizing that everything is connected.
Exactly. It's understanding that seemingly isolated problems are often part of a larger system. And that's a crucial skill for solving complex challenges in any field.
All right, this is all fascinating, but I got to ask, doesn't the source caution against too much mind wandering?
They do. It's like anything else, moderation is key. Too much can make it hard to focus and absorb what you're reading.
So how do we find that sweet spot? Any tips?
Well, first, know what you want to get out of the material. Having a goal in mind helps you stay focused. You could also try actively engaging with the text, highlight key points, take notes, or even talk to yourself about what you're reading.
I do that sometimes. People probably think I'm crazy talking to myself while reading.
It actually helps keep your mind from wandering too far. And of course, choose material that genuinely interests you.
Makes sense. If you're bored, your mind is more likely to wander off in search of something more stimulating. But hold on, this next part blew my mind. The source suggests that mind wandering isn't just good for creative thinking, but might actually benefit our brains.
Right. It's linked to several key aspects of brain health.
Like what? Spill the beans.
Well, for one, it promotes brain plasticity. It's your brain's ability to change and adapt.
I hear that term a lot, but what does it actually mean?
Think of your brain as a forest with paths connecting different areas. Mind wandering is like forging new trails, connecting areas that weren't previously linked, strengthening the entire network. So by engaging different parts of your brain, you're creating new connections and boosting overall brain function.
So it's like giving your brain a workout.
Yeah, it keeps it flexible and resilient. The source also talks about brain network theory, which says our brains are made up of multiple networks that work together. And guess what? Mind wandering actually enhances communication between these networks.
So it's like the ultimate team-building exercise for your brain. I love it.
Right. It helps your brain function more smoothly and efficiently. And then there's the default mode network we talked about earlier.
The daydreaming zone.
Yep. Allowing this network to activate during mind wandering actually gives the brain a chance to rest and reset. That can lead to better focus when you return to the task at hand.
So those mental breaks are actually good for us.
Exactly. It's not just about pushing through and trying to stay focused all the time. We need those moments of rest and rejuvenation to function at our best. And there's one more thing. Dopamine production.
Okay, I know dopamine is like the feel-good chemical.
Yeah.
How does mind wandering boost that?
Remember those aha moments we discussed earlier? The moments of sudden insight and connection?
Oh yeah, those are the best.
Well, those moments actually trigger the release of dopamine. And since mind wandering helps us have more of those aha moments, it essentially boosts dopamine production, making learning more enjoyable and rewarding.
This is incredible. It's like reframing everything I thought I knew about reading and learning. Those times when my mind drifts off, maybe they're not a sign of laziness or inattentiveness, but actually my brain doing important work.
That's exactly it. It challenges the idea that we should always be laser focused. Sometimes the most productive thing we can do is let our minds wander a bit.
So to recap, letting our minds wander can make us more creative and might even be good for our brains. It's like a 2-for-1 deal.
It's a reminder that our brains are incredibly complex and capable of amazing things.
Even when we're not trying to be productive in the traditional sense.
Exactly. Sometimes the best ideas come when we least expect them.
Okay, so all this talk about the benefits of mind wandering is really cool, but the source doesn't just stop there. They raise this fascinating question about how to inspire kids to read and learn, especially young children, knowing what we know now about mind wandering.
Right, because usually we tell kids to focus, to pay attention, to stop daydreaming. But maybe that's not the best approach if we want to foster a love of learning.
So what's the source suggest? How do we encourage kids to embrace their wandering minds?
Well, the source emphasizes the importance of reframing how we view mind wandering. Instead of seeing it as a distraction, what if we helped kids see it as a mini adventure for their brains?
So instead of telling kids to stop daydreaming, we actually encourage them to let their minds wander. It seems counterintuitive, but I'm starting to see the logic.
Think about it. When a child's mind wanders while they're reading, they're not just zoning out. They're making connections, picturing scenes in their heads, building their own understanding of the story.
That's true, and the source suggests using storytelling and simple examples to show kids how mind wandering can actually make reading more fun and exciting.
Absolutely. Imagine you're reading a child a story about a brave knight exploring a dark forest. After a few pages, you could pause and ask, "Have you ever been to a forest? What was it like?"
That's a great idea. It invites the child to connect the story to their own experiences, making it more real and relatable.
Exactly. And as kids get more comfortable with this process, you can introduce more challenging prompts, like asking them to imagine what the knight might be feeling or what they would do in a similar situation.
It's like giving them permission to not only read the story, but to become a part of it. Their mind wandering helps them step inside the world of the book.
The source even suggests using analogies that children can easily understand. For instance, you might compare mind wandering to a playground for the brain, where thoughts can run free and explore new ideas.
I love that. It makes mind wandering sound fun and positive instead of something to be avoided.
Exactly. The goal is to help children see reading as an adventure, not a chore. And mind wandering is a key part of that adventure.
And when reading becomes an adventure, kids are more likely to develop a lifelong love of learning.
Absolutely. It's all about nurturing their natural curiosity and showing them that learning can be a joyful and rewarding experience.
This whole conversation reminds me of something you said earlier about how our brains are wired for exploration and discovery. It's like we're born to be curious, to make connections, to let our minds wander.
It's in our nature, but somewhere along the way, we're often taught to suppress those instincts.
We're told to sit still, focus, pay attention. But maybe we need to find a balance that allows for both focus and those moments of creative exploration.
I think you're right. We need to find that sweet spot where focus and mind wandering can work together to enhance our learning and creativity.
This deep dive has been such a validation for me. I've always loved to daydream and let my mind wander, but I often felt guilty about it.
I think a lot of us feel that way. We're conditioned to believe that productivity means being constantly focused and on task.
But as we've seen today, that's not always the case. Sometimes the most productive thing we can do is give our minds a break and allow them to wander.
Couldn't agree more. Sometimes the best ideas come when we least expect them, often during those moments of mind wandering.
So the next time you find yourself daydreaming, don't beat yourself up about it. Embrace those moments and see where they take you.
Exactly. And the same goes for the children in your life. Encourage them to be curious, to ask questions, and to let their imaginations run wild.
Who knows? You might just spark a lifelong love of learning in the process. This has been such a fascinating discussion, and I'm so glad we had the chance to dive into this topic. But unfortunately, we're just about out of time for today's deep dive. It's almost like we've stumbled upon this hidden superpower,
Yeah.
right? Something we all have, but maybe haven't fully appreciated.
Yeah, it's like we've been given this amazing tool for learning and creativity and even brain health, but then told, don't use it.
Exactly. It's so weird how mind wandering has gotten this bad rap. We call people space cadets or daydreamers like it's a bad thing.
Right, like it's somehow a sign of laziness or lack of focus. But what we've been talking about today completely flips that on its head.
Totally. Maybe instead of trying to squash those moments when our minds wander off, we should be like, go for it.
I think so too. It's time we start seeing mind wandering for what it really is.
Yeah.
A valuable cognitive skill, not some flaw we need to fix.
This whole deep dive has been a serious game changer for me. I'm going to start paying way more attention to where my mind goes when it wanders.
I think you'll be amazed at what you discover. And don't keep it to yourself. Share what you've learned with others. Spread the word about the power of mind wandering.
We need to start celebrating those aha moments instead of feeling like we should have been paying more attention.
Absolutely. Those flashes of insight, those unexpected connections, that's where the magic happens.
Well said. Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our deep dive for today. We hope this conversation has inspired you to see mind wandering in a whole new light.
Remember, it's not about being laser focused all the time. It's about finding that balance between focused attention and letting your mind roam free.
So go ahead, let your minds wander. Embrace those detours, those random connections, those moments of pure curiosity. Who knows where they might lead?
You might just stumble upon your next brilliant idea.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration of the human mind and beyond.
Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those minds wandering.